What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. We just had the NFL draft wrap up over the weekend, which means I was getting dirty in those Google Sheets last night up until like midnight. The guys on the Discord, the guys on the Patreon know I cranked out my top 50 rookie rankings on the Patreon for Dynasty, Superflex, Tight End Premium Leagues. That is all available at patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But because you so graciously clicked on this video, I almost stumbled over that. I'm going to show you guys my top 10 wide receivers. And then also because it's so early, these are all subject to change, but I do feel very firm about how the tiers kind of shake out. So like my top 3 wide receivers and then a cutoff and then my next couple wide receivers. So we're going to revive a video genre that I haven't done since the NFL season, which is going to be a tier list. So we're going to get that fired up on the other side of the intro. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video at any point in time, make sure you get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
And here we are. Let me blow the dust off real quick. Look at this. If only I had some like cool transition to really blow the dust and the cobwebs off. But look at this, fellas. We are in the tier list maker. I think that this kind of goes with this video. It's a rookie ranking video. It's a ranking video. It's a more fun way to do rankings, and you guys can kind of visualize what I'm doing as we go. So I'm going to put myself up in the top right corner here, and we're going to start with tier 1, wide receiver 1. Oh, I'm going towards Treylon Burks' psych. It's Drake London. And I know, here's the thing. Drake London, 8th overall to the Falcons, and I know that Treylon Burks has been my wide receiver 1 the entire process. If you watch my videos, you've known Treylon Burks has been my wide receiver 1 the entire time. So you might be asking yourself, what has changed between now and then? And the biggest input that has changed is that Drake London went top 10. He went 8th overall to the Falcons, which means that he hits my draft capital multiplier. Any wide receiver in my database that already has a pretty strong profile, if they then get picked top 10, they get a huge boost up. So it's not like the Kevin Whites of the world get a huge boost up, or with the Tavon Austin go top 10, it's not like he got boosted up. But if you already have a pretty strong profile, like Drake London, you get a pretty big boost. So Drake London goes from, let's take a look at this real quick. He goes from gold right here. I also have Garrett Wilson in there. We'll talk about that in a second. But he goes from guys in this range of, I think N'Keal Harry is a decent comp for him. I'm trying to think of guys that are kind of his bigger size that are gold prospect wide receivers. But it's not a super strong hit rate. These guys, the gold wide receivers, these are my RS grades. I have videos on these that I've made in the past, but it's my wide receiver prospect model. Each of them get an RS grade. Depending on your RS grade, you get a tier assigned to you. Gold tier hit top 24 seasons at a 45% rate. That's not great. Now, when he gets that top 10 draft capital, he moves from there to here. He moves into the elite range with an 8.96 RS grade, which moves him out of like the N'Keal Harry range to Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins in that area, which is really, really strong. And when you move him to that area, even though Treylon Burks, I think that Treylon Burks has a 9.1 RS grade, so he's like 0.14 more. That's not a huge difference. The whole point of the RS grades is just to fit wide receivers into tiers, which we're going to go over here in a second. And from there, you can kind of make your own decision. And the reason why I've manually put London over Treylon Burks is the NFL spent a top 10 pick on London, so they like him more. Also, Drake London just kind of has a cleaner prospect profile, whereas Treylon Burks is 22. Drake London hasn't even turned 21 yet. He's only 20, which is big, right? Calvin Ridley's a guy who I think he's going to like his 5th year. I know that he's like suspended and everything, but the whole point is that he's old. Same thing with Terry McLaurin. But if you can get a guy like Drake London and he's like barely even going to be 20 heading into his first year, you have more time for him to be that top end A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level asset. Now, I'm not saying that's what he's going to do in year 1. I'm just saying, let's say he produces decently well year 1, goes crazy in year 2 like an A.J. Brown, like a DK Metcalf. You're staring at like a 21, 22-year-old wide receiver as a top 5 wide receiver asset, and he'll probably stay there until he turns like 26, 27. So that's kind of what you're looking at with Drake London, whereas, Burks' time as at the peak of like a dynasty wide receiver rankings at 22, it's not as long, if that makes sense. Now that's like super like micro detail, but when we're kind of splitting hairs between guys in the same tier, it does move the needle. You also have usage concerns with Treylon Burks, where he plays a lot in the slot. I know that a lot of people think that he has some red flags, where I think that he came into camp or like the combine or something overweight. You also have the stuff where he's kind of used in an unorthodox role. He's kind of used in like a Deebo Samuel type role in that Arkansas offense. He's not a very big guy. He doesn't win in a traditional way. Now, we're talking a little bit hand in the dirt, tape grinder stuff here. That's not really my forte. But when you look at Drake London, he wins like a normal wide receiver, like a DeAndre Hopkins, like a Mike Evans. He plays primarily on the outside, and he wins with his size at the catch point. He can beat press man. The way that his game transitions to the NFL, it's much smoother than Treylon Burks. And that is why I have him over. Again, he's younger. His game transitions a little bit better. And then he also goes 8th overall to the Falcons, which we haven't even really talked about landing spot yet. Again, I already made a video on this last week where landing spot's not a huge input for me. I really just care about draft capital. That top 10 draft capital is huge. When we're talking about the Falcons, some people might overthink it and be like, oh, he's not going to get a ton with Marcus Mariota. Kyle Pitts is already there. First of all, I think there's plenty of ball to go around. I think Calvin Ridley should be gone by the time that Drake London's good. Him and Kyle Pitts should be able to coexist just fine. It just comes down to them drafting a new quarterback. As of right now, they have the second lowest win total per Vegas, so it seems like they are going to be picking highly next year. It could be the Bryce Young sweepstakes, the CJ Stroud sweepstakes, whoever has that Zach Wilson, Joe Burrow type ascension sweepstakes, whether that's Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, whatever. He should have a new quarterback next year. Could also be like a free agent or something. I don't know who's set to hit the market right now. I'm trying to think. I feel like Lamar hasn't signed a long-term deal yet, but I could be wrong. Now, when we're talking about wide receiver 2, again, very close. This is just for my tiers. Again, if you want to have, you can have these top 3 wide receivers ordered however you want. But for number 2 for me, this is where I'll go Treylon Burks. And again, he's 22, whereas Drake London's 20. Garrett Wilson's also 22, like Treylon Burks. Or I think he's like 21.7. He's like maybe like a couple months younger than Treylon Burks. And when it comes down to Garrett Wilson versus Treylon Burks, let me get this screenshot out of here. When it comes down to them versus each other, what it really comes down to is just kind of the wide receiver type you like. They both got fine draft capital. Treylon Burks has a little bit better prospect profile in terms of production. Garrett Wilson probably looks a little bit better on tape, though Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks both tied on Lance Zierlein's film grades as the wide receiver 1 with a 6.5, which is really good. So it really just comes down to the kind of wide receiver that you chase, and just the way that I'm chasing those bigger body wide receivers. Treylon Burks is like 6'2", 225. He looks like A.J. Brown, Demaryius Thomas, where as Garrett Wilson, and I'm not saying that these guys can't win in the modern NFL. In fact, a lot of people are winning in this way. But you have Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs. That's more his area, which again is completely fine. But when we're talking about the last, the last, I think since 2013, just last year. So we're talking about like prototypical wide receivers, big guys like Treylon Burks. The new term, I know in the past I've used alpha. I get absolutely shit on in the comments for using alpha, for calling athletes betas. I can't stress this enough, guys. I'm not calling them as a person. I'm not calling him a beta male. I'm just calling him a beta-sized athlete. Like alpha, beta, theta, whatever. Like in math, that was just like the Greek numbering. Alpha just means bigger, beta means smaller. That's all it comes down to. People have made it more than it is, so I have changed it to prototypical, yes, no. If you are a prototype wide receiver, which is 5'11", 195 pounds or more, 26 or better BMI, that is a prototypical wide receiver. You guys have made me do that, but it's fine. It's not a big deal. Again, those guys, last year we had 3 wide receivers score 20 or more fantasy points per game. We had Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams. All of those wide receivers hit those prototypical wide receiver thresholds. Now, Garrett Wilson does not. Drake London and Treylon Burks do. Now, since 2013, 16 wide receivers have hit 20-plus points per game. You have Devontae Adams, Josh Gordon, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams. I think I already said that. You have guys like Jordy Nelson. You have guys like Demaryius Thomas, Keenan Allen. These are just off the top of my head. I don't have the list in front of me. But 16 wide receivers have hit 20-plus points per game since 2013. 14 of them were prototypical wide receivers. The other 2 were Tyreek Hill and Antonio Brown, which are non-prototypical wide receivers or the former beta wide receivers. So just with that math, I think that you just have an easier path to that 20-plus points per game, like monster upside from a guy like Treylon Burks. Now, I will say Garrett Wilson is, I think, a better floor play. I think his median range of outcomes is probably better than Treylon Burks. I think that he's probably a better fit in an NFL offense. He can win in a more conventional way, whereas Treylon Burks his usage is sort of weird, where he's not lining up against press man a ton, and he's kind of going out of the slot and doing a lot of yak stuff. Again, I understand that it's more of an upside play, but with Treylon Burks, his profile is just very, very clean. He didn't need I think that if he had gone 10th overall, I don't think he would have been legendary, but he would have been very close, which is like the top tier. He had a production profile of legendary wide receiver. He just needed to go either top 10 or have like freak athleticism. He had neither of those, but he's still a very strong prospect, as we can see here. And this is his production profile. So his receiving yard market share. This is market share of receiving yards in the Arkansas offense over his first 3 years. And when you look at it compared to the other two wide receivers, he is first in year 1. He's tied with Garrett Wilson in year 2, and he's first in year 3. When it just comes down to production, I know this is experience adjusted, not age adjusted. If you age adjusted, it'll look a little bit different than this. But every step of the way, Treylon Burks has demanded a higher market share of his offense. Now, you can also say Garrett Wilson had JSN, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave. You can also say Drake London had Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I completely get it. I'm just saying that Treylon Burks was a monster producer in the SEC. So while the other guys competed with wide receivers on their roster, Treylon Burks played against tougher competition. Regardless, again, monster producer. I know that he's not liked by the film community, but again, like I said, Lance Zierlein has him 6.5 Lance Zierlein grade. He is tied for the wide receiver 1 in this class next to Garrett Wilson. Now, when we talk about landing spot, again, I don't like talking about landing spot a ton, especially with the high-end guys, especially with like an elite wide receiver prospect. I just want to bet on the profile. I'm not going to overthink it and put a guy like Sky Moore or Olave or I don't know, anybody in these dream landing spots. Yeah, I guess like a Sky Moore. I'm not going to put any of those guys ahead of an elite wide receiver prospect. It's just not how I'm wired. Now with Treylon Burks, he gets a Titans landing spot, which I guess is okay with A.J. Brown gone. I think that people are a little bit too optimistic, but I guess with A.J. Brown gone, you have Tannehill there. Right away, he should see volume right away, but I think his long-term upside is a little bit capped under that like Tannehill, Derrick Henry regime where they want to run the ball a ton. But I think right away, he could be in line for like 100-plus targets. There's really no one else there. You're getting like, I think Robert Woods coming off an ACL tear, and that's really pretty much it. So it's not difficult to see him used right off the bat, and it's also not difficult to see that coaching staff kind of understanding how to use a player like Treylon Burks because he is kind of a younger, rawer version of A.J. Brown. Now, when we talk about wide receiver 3, we already kind of talked about him a ton just by, kind of going through this tier, but we're going to talk about Garrett Wilson here. And we'll bring up the first screenshot again because he also benefited from that top 10 draft capital jump. So he goes from here where he's kind of comped to like Will Fuller, Jerry Jeudy, Rashad Bateman, which I think are fine comps. But then once he gets that top 10 draft capital, we're talking about CeeDee Lamb, Calvin Ridley, which I think are really good comps for him. He is that, svelte, smooth operating type wide receiver, wins in all phases, really clean profile, just a very strong profile. Again, I mean, really all it comes down to me is just for perceived upside, and that's just me saying big wide receivers score more points most of the time. If you want to have Garrett Wilson ahead, that's completely fine. Now, again, I think that he is kind of like a Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, where it seems like a lot of people gravitate towards that build a little bit more in terms of the market. Like all this time, Jerry Jeudy has had such an insulated market value. He's maintained top 24 market value in Dynasty ADP despite really not doing a ton through 2 years. I know he's commanded a ton of targets, but he hasn't even put up like a top 24 season or anything yet. He was injured for half of his second year. I'm just surprised that his value has maintained the way that it has. And I think that that's sort of, I think that some people just like those builds a little bit better, which that's a little bit something a little bit more far out there when we're talking about Garrett Wilson, but I could see that being the case with the Garrett Wilson. Now, when we talk about Garrett Wilson's profile, his year 2 was really strong. I'll pull up this again, but his year 2 was really strong. This is in receiving yard market share, but from an efficiency standpoint, it was insane. It was the highest of this class in terms of year 2 receiving yards per team pass attempt. Receiving yards per team pass attempt is just receiving yards divided by pass attempts, and what it comes down to is dominance, right? So same thing as receiving yard market share, but it also combines efficiency. What are you doing on a per pass attempt basis for your team? 3.21 is insane. And that was in year 2. I was going to say Jackson Smith the Jigba, but I'll just say JSN. He had a 3.26 yards per team pass attempt last year and is heralded as like this crazy wide receiver prospect. Garrett Wilson put up pretty much that same number in just a stack of a wide receiver room. So he was kind of on that JSN type trajectory. Third year, a little bit of a dip, but we did have, JSN just going crazy. I think JSN's bowl game, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. and JSN's bowl games, like just going off for like 600 yards or like 500 yards, kind of killed Garrett Wilson's receiving yard market share numbers for year 3. But again, Really strong profile, and you really can't knock him for not being as dominant as Treylon Burks, just given that he was in a wide receiver room full of first rounders in Olave, JSN, Jameson Williams. Now, when we talk about landing spot, he goes to my New York Jets. And I do sometimes wonder if I'm kind of too critical of Jets players. I never want to be that guy where I just love all Jets players and I'm all in on all the Jets, and you can't really take my opinion seriously when it comes to a Jets player. I try to be as level-headed as possible. I will say throughout the entire process, Garrett Wilson has been my wide receiver 3. I'm just maintaining that at this point. Now, in that offense, I'm really not worried for Elijah Moore, and I'm really not worried for Garrett Wilson. I think there's plenty of ball to go around for both of those guys. What it simply comes down to from a ceiling standpoint, I think both guys well within the range of outcomes to be top 24 wide receivers into perpetuity, but to be like top 12, top 5 guys, one of them, one or the two, kind of looking at like a budget Jamar Chase and T. Higgins here. You need Zach Wilson to be that guy. You're going to need a quarterback that can elevate his offense, provide efficiency on a per throw basis, and score points. We didn't see that from Zach Wilson last year, but it's not out of the range of outcomes that he has that year 2 jump like we saw Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. I think Derek Carr had one as well. We do see that here and there where quarterbacks in their second year just completely, set the world on fire. And as a Jets fan, I would absolutely love that. But in the event that doesn't happen, at that point, it's tough. Do they ride with a Zach Wilson for year 3 and you have like a Sam Darnold thing going on? Do they just hit the reset button and draft a Stroud or Bryce Young next year? I'm not super concerned about the quarterback thing, but that is what your upside scenario hinges on. The long-term, pretty much like the long-term potential of Zach Wilson. Again, though, I would give, if on like an F to A+ scale of landing spot, I'd give it like a B minus. It's not the end of the world. It's just worth mentioning. Now, when we talk about our next tier of wide receivers, this is my very firm top 3. I think if you have anybody else in your top 3, I'm not going to make any accusations, but I think you're a little bit misguided. Now, a wide receiver that I love, and I'm kind of almost going against my own process, a guy that I don't think I would have been high on like last year or the year before that, but a player I can buy into is Jameson Williams. I'm just in love with the profile, man. I absolutely love Jameson Williams, and it seems like people are kind of souring on him for this Detroit landing spot. He's similar to Drake London, in my opinion, where the quarterback of the future is not on the roster, so you have Jared Goff there on Detroit. I think next year, again, you can't say that everyone's going to get C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young because there's not enough C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young to go around for everybody, but in a perfect world, it's C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, whatever quarterback emerges. Now, maybe I'm an idiot, but I kind of like what the Lions are building here. Like, this offense looks good on paper. You have Penei Sewell, you have Taylor Decker, you have Frank Ragnow up front, like a very solid offensive line. You have DeAndre Swift in the backfield, TJ Hawkinson at tight end. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot. Now you're adding Jameson Williams to that. I feel like here's the thing. Maybe this is crazy, but I feel like they're kind of, at this point, they're probably they probably need one more year of development, a solid draft class and free agent class, plus a quarterback. And they're in the mix at the very least to just be a potent offense, right? Now, it does depend who they get as OC and all that. I do believe that they still have Anthony Lynn there, which isn't great. But they're building something there is really what that comes down to. Now, when we talk about the player and not the landing spot, again, this isn't a player I usually like. But now I'm not going to say that I've done film research or anything, but I've watched Jameson Williams. I've watched some highlights. I've watched some film. I don't do my own film grades. I really don't do my own film analysis, but like Jameson Williams just looks special, man. Like he just has a crazy second gear, and it is dangerous because you are kind of running into like Henry Ruggs and John Ross in terms of that archetype. But I really do think if he ran a 40, he would have ran in the 4.2s. I also, again, I'm not an expert on tape, but the guy was outrunning Georgia defenders in cover 4. Like, pretty wild. Like and those Georgia defenders like Louis Cine, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, but that safety, I know that he got drafted. Like they have NFL players on that Georgia team and he torched him. It's just wild. Now, when you look at the stats, he had 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns on 20 yards per reception on 79 catches. 79 catches, turning 79 catches in the SEC into 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns is kind of wild. And Lance Zierlein agrees. He looks great on tape. So do the NFL evaluators. Lance Zierlein has him as the wide receiver 3 in film grade, 0.02 behind Burks and Garrett Wilson. I believe that he would have been the first wide receiver taken in the NFL draft had he not suffered an ACL injury. Still pretty wild that he goes 12th overall despite the ACL injury. Now, I know that the biggest knock on him from a guy like me's perspective, kind of an analytics nerd, is that Jameson Williams is like his breakout age isn't great. By the way, I don't even use breakout age in my model, but like they talk about great breakout age. He didn't do anything in year 1 and year 2. Now, this is why I think it's a little bit different than a guy like Devonta Smith is probably a bad example, but a guy who struggled in year 1, year 2, year 3, and then only had a great year 4, kind of like a Kevin White. The difference between him and Kevin White is this. And it's that Jameson Williams, if anybody has an excuse not to produce in after college, it is Jameson Williams. He had Olave, who just went 11th overall. He had Garrett Wilson, who went 10th overall. And he had JSN, who's probably going to be a top 5 to 10 pick next year. It's really hard to expect him to get on the field and produce in that environment. I understand that JSN was younger than him, so he should be, he should have some seniority and play over him. But JSN really didn't have his breakout season until this year when Jameson Williams left. It's just tough. And then he also puts his nuts on the table. And instead of he could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to like a Florida. He could have gone to a Missouri. He could have gone to a Pac-12 team like, I'm trying to think. He could have gone to like an Oregon or something. He could have gone anywhere. But instead, he transfers to Alabama, a wide receiver factory, and he goes there and produces next to John Mechie, who's like a wide receiver talent. He was getting first-round buzz before the season. Then on top of that, they had like three really good incoming freshmen, like 5 and 4 stars between. I want to say, if I butcher these names, it's whatever. But JoJo Earl, Aguiye Hall, and then the one who produced the most last year, Jacare Brooks. In the middle of all that, he was by far the most productive wide receiver on that offense. So it's really tough to say that he should have been producing in 4 wide receiver sets on Ohio State. Again, I think that it's just wrong place, wrong time. He hit the worst landing spot to go in terms of like recruiting and whatever, though he probably saw like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave both accept recruiting offers to go to Ohio State. But nonetheless, he goes to Alabama, he produces, and it's almost like the perfect spot for him to transfer to prove to us that he doesn't have to be the only guy to produce, if that makes sense. Now, our next wide receiver in this tier, our wide receiver 5. Wow, we are 20 minutes in, and I am only 4 wide receivers deep. That is my bad, fellas. But I don't know. Maybe you guys will like this sort of deeper dive type video. Now, we're going to talk about Sky Moore here. And I've talked a ton about Sky Moore on the channel already. I love his profile. He's my wide receiver 5 pre-draft. He's still my wide receiver 5. I wouldn't go absolutely crazy because of that Chiefs landing spot and move him anywhere sort of outrageous here. But he goes to the Chiefs, and that's pretty much best case scenario. Let's actually put him in the wide receivers 5 spot. They have had a top 6 scoring offense each of the last 5 years. They're projected for the most dropbacks in the NFL per Mike Clay, which means they're going to have a ton of pass volume, a ton of scoring. And the Chiefs have a contract with Mahomes through 2030, which is wild. And from it, just I think the simplest way you can break it down in terms of how that landing spot affects Sky Moore is a target from Patrick Mahomes. I guess you can say all targets are not created equal. That sounds a little bit weird, but like a target from Mariota or Tannehill's pretty efficient, but a target from Mariota or a target from Zach Wilson or a target from Jared Goff is not worth the same as a target from Sky Moore. So that's really what you're benefiting from there is just a lot of efficiency, a lot of scoring, and then on top of being an efficient wide receiver on a per target basis from Mahomes' side of things, you're also getting a ton of scoring opportunities and touchdowns. So you get a ton of upside with Sky Moore. You also have him, you kind of have like the upside of him sort of being Mahomes's like long-term option there with like Juju on a 1-year deal. You have Kelsey getting old, and then that's pretty much it. I think we have McCole Hardman also on the roster, but that's really it. They have done a really poor job of cap management, and I'm kind of talking my ass there. I haven't dove into things too heavily, but it does seem like they've kind of fumbled the bag in terms of cap management. All of it's going to Mahomes. They kind of have it allocated in rougher spots. Sky Moore has a chance to be maybe not in year 1, but the wide receiver 1 of the future for the Chiefs. Now, with Sky Moore, he gets second-round draft capital, which is what we wanted. He already had a strong profile already, and he just has done nothing but produce his entire collegiate career. He comes out of, I believe, Western Michigan. I always get Western Michigan and Central Michigan confused. I want to say, I'm kind of rambling, but I want to say Antonio Brown played at Western Michigan I want to say Antonio Brown played at Central Michigan and Sky Moore played at Western Michigan. Now, regardless, you have a prospect who is 21 years old, an early declare. We're going to get into why early declare matters so much in a second, but he's an early declare, 21 years old. And not only that, but he was played in the group of 5. He played in the MAC, which is so crazy. I cannot stress enough how insane it is to play 3 years and then go to the league and then get drafted in the second round from the MAC. It took Dwayne Eskridge like 6 years to play in the MAC and then get to the NFL. Like doing that in a 3-year succession, producing the way he did, declaring early and going to the league, It's insane. When you look at the metrics right here, receiving yards per team pass attempt, my favorite receiving or wide receiver metric for college players. When you compare him to other group of 5 guys, you have Devonta Adams, who played for Fresno State, Antonio Brown, who played for Central Michigan, I believe. He outproduced all of them on a year-by-year basis. He fits the part of that superstar wide receiver from a small school. If you're going to be from a small school and have that upside, you being an early declare in the NFL saying, I like that guy despite him being at a small school and dominating that competition, that's really all it comes down to with Sky Moore. So you get the landing spot, a really strong profile. He's a little bit undersized at I want to say he's 5'9", 190. So he kind of, you're sort of looking in terms of comps at a Golden Tate, maybe not a Tyler Lockett, but yeah, something in that Golden Tate area of, it's tough to see him be a dominant, it's tough to see him be a 20 point per game Tyreek Hill type asset in that offense. But if there was anywhere for him to reach that ceiling, it would be the Chiefs offense. So that's why I have him wide receiver 5, but he's in this tier. So if you want to have him ahead of Jameson Williams, that is all power to you, brother. Now this is going to be a little bit of a controversial tier, B tier. And this is going to be, I'm going to cover 2 players here. I've gotten some pushback on this, and people keep on asking me why I have it like this. So I think that this is actually a cool, this video is going to take forever, but whatever. This is post the NFL draft. You guys are maybe going to love this. I don't know. Let me know down below in the comments. But let's talk about one of the bigger choices I have to make in my rankings. Now, in my rankings, the rookie rankings, these are in a vacuum. If I'm on the clock at the 108, 109, I am not straight up taking George Pickens over Chris Olave, because this is how I have it in a vacuum. I do prefer George Pickens to Chris Olave, but in the market's eyes, it seems like Olave is somebody that's going to have an ADP of 107, 108 in rookie drafts, whereas George Pickens will be that 112, 201. That doesn't seem like a lot in terms of rookie drafts, but from a startup value perspective and just a team building perspective, Chris Olave probably ends up being in startups a 6th, 7th round pick, whereas George Pickens ends up being a 9th, 10th round pick. Maybe I'm even doing that math wrong. Maybe it's a 5th, 6th for Chris Olave, and then for Pickens, it's 8th, 9th, 9th, 10. Why would I give up that value just to put my money where my mouth is and prove to the world that I have Pickens over Olave? In that scenario, and I'm on the clock, and Olave's, the better pick per ADP, I will take Olave, and then I can turn around and trade, Olave for Pickens plus, or I can just hold on to Olave, maybe trade him later. And I play in multiple leagues. I play in 8 leagues, or I play in 9 leagues, and I can go out there. And if I want to get Pickens in a league, I will go out there and get Pickens in a league. I think that we kind of focus in terms of Dynasty. Now, if you have one league, it's a little bit sort of tougher. You kind of have to sort of pick your guys or whatever. But when you play 5+ leagues like I do, I kind of just take a portfolio approach. I'm not going to reach on a player for no reason in terms of ADP. Right? If I know that in another league, George Pickens might be there 112, 201, 202, why would I take him in this league at the 107, 108? Why would I do that? Now, why I have Pickens over Olave in a vacuum, I don't know why I said the vacuum, this is what it boils down to for me. A lot of people tell me, how can you have Pickens over Olave? Olave won in the first round, Pickens won in the second round. And this is sort of what it comes down to. The round 2 versus round 1 difference isn't too massive. I think that this is it right here. Yeah. So when you're looking at it from this perspective, by the way, this is how my RS grades are made. So I have each input. So this is draft capital, first round, second round, third round, day 3. I have their average point per game per 3 seasons to this side, to your right, and then I have their numeric grade. And then you get a grade out of 10 for each and every metric. 4 wide receivers with first round draft capital, you average 10.7 points per game over your first 3 years. Second round wide receivers average 8.2. That's only a 23% drop-off from wide receivers in the 2007 to 2019 draft classes. Now, when we look at early declare versus non-early declare, which is what's really the deciding point, when it comes to George Pickens versus Olave, this is really what it comes down to. Round 1 versus round 2, early declare versus non-early declare. Now, when you look at early declare versus non-early declare, I'm almost stumbling over those words now. You're looking at 11.09 points per game for 20 to 21-year-old rookie early declares, which is what George Pickens fits into. Then you have the non-early declares, which is 6.48 points per game through their first 3 years. That's a 42% drop-off. So instead of a 23% drop-off, it's a 42% drop-off. Now, I do understand a lot of you guys are going to be reading this and saying this is a little bit skewed. And I admit that, because non-early declares are going to have a lot of day 3 guys, where early declare 21-year-old guys are going to have a lot of first-round guys. So it skews the data a little bit in terms of what we're looking for. So a more fair approach to this is to sort of zoom in a little bit here. Now, we've talked about already what the wide receiver tiers mean. Both of these players in the RS grades in my model grade out as gold wide receivers, literally within point. I think that in terms of out of 10, Pickens is a 7.18, Olave is a 7.17. And when we look at a guy like Chris Olave, let's zoom in for a second. Gold wide receivers hit top 24 seasons at a 45% rate. So we're going to look at all first-round wide receivers who were gold and were non-early declare. So let's pull that up real quick. I believe it should be here. Yeah, this is what we're looking at. And I actually said in my, I'm not sure if I've sort of had this take in a video yet. I feel like I have, but you guys are going to hate this. But I think a fair comp, just based on analytical profile, not based on tape, play style, anything like that, Kendall Wright and Corey Coleman look a lot like Chris Olave as non-early declare first-round picks. It's an ugly list here, man. You're outside of Dwayne Bowe, who's kind of your ceiling here. You're looking at Kendall Wright, Mike Williams, Devontae Parker. If you kind of just want to talk about like those svelte wide receivers like a Chris Olave, it really just comes down to John Ross, Corey Coleman, Kendall Wright. It looks really, really rough. And of this list, we have 14 wide receivers, not including Chris Olave. We have 14 wide receivers. 4 of them hit top 24 seasons. That is a 28.5% hit rate, even though they're all in gold tier, which have a 45% hit rate. So these guys in this area, gold wide receivers, non-early declares, have a worse hit rate than gold. They are almost all silvers. I mean, I actually looked at this list and I'm almost debating to myself adding to the model a stronger non-early declare input so that first round picks don't just get elevated to gold even if they're non-early declares, because I almost would want all of these players to be silvers if I could choose. Now, when we look at the other side of things, again, 28.5% is bad. 25% hit rate is silver. So these players in this area, first round wide receivers, non-early declares that are also golds, are players that are pretty much silvers. Now, when we look at Pickens, we go to round 2 wide receivers, golds, all early declares. It's a much better list. You have Jordy Nelson, Jarvis Landry, Deshaun Jackson, Robert Woods, Juju Smith-Schuster, T. Higgins, Sidney Rice, Golden Tate. It's just a stronger list. Now, is it all hits across the board? No, but in a tier that is gold, that has a 45% hit rate, this is a list that is 8 for 16. So a 50% hit rate. A little bit better than just a normal gold are these round 2 players that are also early declares and golds. So this is why I prefer George Pickens, because Chris Olave fits more in that Kendall Wright, Corey Coleman area, where I guess like Dwayne Bowe is kind of his ceiling. But when we talk about George Pickens as a guy who profiles as a pure X wide receiver, beats press man, plays really physical at the line of scrimmage, you're looking at a guy who profiles a lot like T. Higgins and Sidney Rice on the outside. I chase that profile. When you look at these names, Jordy Nelson, that's another guy that I'll chase. Juju Smith-Schuster, I'll chase that all day. Robert Woods, I'll chase that all day. It's just a little bit more of a sure thing. I think that the floor and the ceiling is higher in this range. So that is why I prefer Pickens. Again, they are in the same tier. If you want to go Olave ahead of Pickens, I cannot fault you. Again, they are in the same tier for me. That is just simply why I prefer George Pickens. Now, if we want to talk a little bit about their landing spots, because I kind of do want to sort of cover every wide receiver, their landing spots, whatever. I don't mind the Steelers' landing spot for George Pickens. The Steelers have a great track record with wide receivers. I know it's going to be a little bit crowded off the bat where you have Pickens, Claypool, Deontay Johnson. It seems like them drafting a wide receiver in George Pickens, it seems like Deontay Johnson is going to be leaving. So I would say after this year, Deontay Johnson's probably gone. Claypool, I don't know if he's in the long-term plan. So you kind of have a lot of things moving here where I'm not super concerned with the target competition for George Pickens. We saw a young Deontay Johnson and Claypool both ascend next to Juju Smith-Schuster, who we thought was like this god of a wide receiver. Remember, he was like sort of looked at as like A.J. Brown through like years 2 and 3. So with Steeler wide receivers and, packed wide receiver rooms, I'm just going to bet on the talent with the George Pickens. Now, when we talk about Chris Olave, he goes top 12. Despite those awful comps, he looked great on film. Lance Zierlein had him as, I think, like a 6.4-ish type guy. Actually, no, he had him as a 6.43 as the wide receiver 4 behind Burks, Wilson, Jamison, Williams. So he had the 4th highest film score. He also had a great reception perception, and I understand that that's all great. What it comes down to with Olave for me is, again, that early declare isn't great, and I'm not sure that he's ever going to have a top 12 season in his range. He does kind of just seem more like this is an awful comp, but like a Robin more than a Batman is like the easiest way I could put it, where he just seems more like a a budget. He kind of looks like a budget version of like Tyler Lockett, not even from like a game perspective, but just from a profile in terms of fantasy. I think that he's just could be a perpetual wide receiver 2 forever, which is great. I just tend to swing more for the fences personally. Now, George Pickens could completely flame out, be this year's Terrace Marshall, but that's a bet I'm willing to make. Now, just for reference, Terrace Marshall in the model is a silver. George Pickens is a gold. Moving on to tier 4, this is our last tier here, and it's pretty much just a jumble of a junk tier of wide receivers that I'm not a fan of. This first one, really not a fan of, but I simply just have him here because I'm deferring to first-round draft capital with Jahan Dotson. That's really all I got for him. He was a non-early declare. He had not even really great production. Like, he just didn't really pop anywhere. He didn't produce well. He only passed my production thresholds in year 3. He played 4 years, so that's only 1 out of 4 years that he looked good. He's like on paper, he's a worse version of KJ Hamler, but he got first round draft capital. It's very weird. Now, I know film guys love him. I know Bush over that Fantasy Stock Exchange loves Jahan Dotson, what he put on tape. And if Jahan Dotson had put something better on tape from Lance Zierlein's perspective, now again, every film evaluator is different. That's why it's so hard to kind of incorporate a subjective input like that. But I go with Lance Zierlein, and when you look at Lance Zierlein's grade for him, it really wasn't that strong. We're looking at wide receiver, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's wide receiver 7. And just for reference, a 6.4 or better from what I've seen, a 6.4 or better pretty much is a first round grade from Lance Zierlein. So we had like a second round grade on him in the same range as a guy like Christian Watson. So it's really tough for me to say his tape pops off, and that's why I should like him. I do believe that if he had a 6.4 or better Lance Zierlein grade, he probably is a gold wide receiver, but he's a silver. So it's not great. Again, production's not great. He's not an uber athlete. I don't really know what his upside even looks like. He is a smaller wide receiver. I think he might even be just a better real-life wide receiver than a fantasy one. I also don't love the landing spot. He does go 16th overall, so that's really cool from a outperforming draft capital perspective. He was supposed to sneak into the first round, but completely killed it. 16th overall, sort of part of like wide receiver being inflated in terms of the trade stuff with Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams. Everybody wants a wide receiver on a rookie deal now. It's just rough. This landing spot in Washington, McLaurin's already there, and I don't really care too much about wide receiver rooms, but Terry McLaurin's already there. It seems like he's going to be there for a little bit. You also have Wentz, who's not a great quarterback, and he seems more of a long-term answer than Mariota or Jared Goff. Like, he doesn't seem like a bridge quarterback. Carson Wentz almost seems like he was brought in there where if he plays like decently well this year, he could just be like Jahan Dotson's quarterback for like the next like 3-4 years. So it's not great. Again, I don't know. Jahan Dotson might just be like a solid wide receiver in the NFL. Maybe he could be like a Tyler Boyd. Again, not a profile I love at all. If I have to take him on the clock, I'm not going to be thrilled about it, but he is just a profile. I am just betting on first round draft capital here. Now, wide receiver, I believe this is wide receiver 8. Or no, wide receiver 9. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wide receiver 9 is Christian Watson, who I'm actually kind of excited about. He's a really fun prospect. Now, in terms of his downside from kind of the lens that I look through, he played 5 years at North Dakota State, didn't declare early, didn't really even dominate at an FCS level, which is really tough. Like you kind of prefer a guy that looks like Andy Isabella and just like dominated his poor competition. But I want to say I was reading Matt Harmon's blurb on Christian Watson, and he was saying like North Dakota State runs such a run-heavy offense that you almost don't really get to see what he does in terms of like run routes and produce. So maybe that kind of affected it a little bit in terms of like maybe he was in a run-first offense, even though I do use market share stats, so I'm not sure how that could skew it. But he comes out for me. Again, these are my RS grades, so each metric is like an F through an A+. He comes out as a C in my production metric, so he really didn't dominate. This is his comp list. So you can see he had a B film grade, a C experience adjusted production grade, C age adjusted production. Age profile is just early declare and draft age, so he wasn't an early declare, so he gets an F there. He gets A plus athleticism, and that's kind of where his like pros pretty much start for him. It's just that he's a crazy athlete. He has 4.3 speed at 6'4", 208 pounds, 95th percentile burst score, 9.96 RAS out of 10. He is a freak athlete. He is almost kind of a terrible comp, but he's like a skinnier. I don't know. I was gonna call him like DK Metcalf, but maybe something like Martavis Bryant would be a little bit better. But that's kind of how he looks. Now, again, he's a silver wide receiver. These guys only hit top 24 seasons at a 25% rate. But I ran his comps, which is what you're looking at. I probably should have explained that a little bit better. His comp list is actually really fun and pretty good for a guy who's a silver wide receiver. You don't usually see when I filter any prospect, their comps and they're silver or worst, you're kind of scraping the barrel. But these are pretty fun comps. He gets Mike Wallace, Terry McLaurin, Brandon Ayuk, and Chase Claypool, all guys that would be really good outcomes for Christian Watson. Now imagine any one of those guys. Imagine if Chase Claypool got traded today to the Packers, he'd probably fly up ADP. He'd probably get a big boost in his trade value. So that's interesting, right? When you think about a guy like this who has a ton of upside as a deep threat and a down the field wide receiver, that's really fun in an offense with Aaron Rodgers. The reason why I have him here at wide receiver 11 is because I don't love, or not wide receiver 11, wide receiver 9. I don't love worshiping landing spot, but you got Aaron Rodgers. We're now into the area of silver wide receivers. This is where I'll put him. Now, again, these comps aren't terrible. You do have some ugly ones, like Zay Jones is pretty ugly. I feel like Torrey Smith isn't even that bad. If that's Torrey Smith on the Ravens, that's not that bad. But then you have Miles Boykin as well. So definitely kind of a Jacqueline Hyde, is it? I was gonna say Jacqueline Hobbs. I don't know, but I'm saying that wrong for sure. But you get what I'm saying. It's very boom bust, but that's fun at the end of the first round in a draft class like this. That kind of sucks overall. Now our last wide receiver is going to be controversial. A lot of you guys are going to hate this, but we're going to have Wan'Dale Robinson here. Let's put him on there. Wide receiver 10. He goes second round to the Giants. I understand that a lot of people do not like him, but I had him projected for third round draft capital. He goes second round, which puts him as a gold wide receiver. He's a gold wide receiver just based off his stats. He has a 45% chance to get a top 24 season, unlike Christian Watson and Jahan Dotson. Here's the thing. Put some respect on my name. Wan'Dale Robinson, again, gold wide receiver. If he was bigger, I would have him in A or B tier, but I have him in C tier behind two silver wide receivers. I understand the concerns. I really do. I understand the concerns. I get it. He is small. He has a limited route tree. I understand that, maybe his game doesn't translate well. That is why I have him bumped to wide receiver 10, but that's pretty much the lowest I can go. I'm not bumping him below a Jalen Tolbert. I'm not bumping him below a John Mechie. If you want to bump him below David Bell, have at it, but I'm not putting bad wide receivers ahead of him, or not even bad wide receivers, just wide receivers that don't really compare to him as a prospect. Now, when we talk about his route running, and let's do a little Slim Shady from 8 Mile here. We'll talk about his negatives first, and I understand that his routes aren't great. I get that he's 5'8", he's 180 pounds. He kind of is a gadget type guy with poor route running. This is what Matt Harmon said about him. It's really not good. He has a 46.8% success rate against man coverage. That's really not good. 74.4% success rate versus zone. That's decent. 21.4% success rate versus press coverage. Really not good. So he said, however, he's just not there as a technician or as a consistent separator to comfortably project him as anything more than a created touches contributor right now. His success rate versus man and press coverage were bottom barrel scores. So a lot of Rondale Moore type vibes with this player. I think that we're getting a lot of those vibes. I think a lot of people are very burned from Rondale Moore last year. They don't want to have another gadget guy. They don't want to spend another pick on a Tutu Atwell, on a KJ Hamler, on a Rondale Moore. And I completely get that. But this is a really weak class. You are staring down the barrel of some really, really bad prospects. And when you look at Wan'Dale Robinson and you just forget about the hype for a second, again, look, this is the Slim Shady thing. I already talked about his negatives. We're going to talk about his pros. From a production profile, he is arguably the best production profile in this class. These are his receiving yard market share numbers next to the big three elite wide receivers at the top here. So the S tier wide receivers, we're comparing him to those guys. From a production standpoint, he is the only player outside of Sky Moore who is not an S tier but can compete with S tier from a production standpoint. Again, there's other inputs in the model. That's why he's not elite. But he's right there. He's second in year 1. He's third in year 2. He's first in year 3 in receiving yard market share. He is right in the mix from a production standpoint, which is wild considering the fact that he played in the SEC. Now, in years 1 and year 2, he played for Nebraska, who had a Navy-esque offense where they're not running the option, but they're just not really passing the ball. So it's just wild. I mean, he put up more than 100 catches, more than 1,300 yards on a 10-plus ADOT in the SEC. So it's not like he was just hovering around the line of scrimmage. I know that Rondale Moore in his final year had about a 2.5 ADOT. Wan'Dale Robinson was operating around the first down marker and average depth of target. So, and that's not to say that there's not gadget concerns, and I'm not saying that he can be a full-time perimeter wide receiver at all. I'm just saying that he is more than just a gadget player. So I feel like people that are souring on sort of this Rondale archetype is fair, but I do think that Elijah Moore is a fair comp for him. If you're going to say, every wide receiver that's 5'8" and under have been unsuccessful in the NFL, and you start bringing up names like Tavon Austin and guys who are 5'6", if you're going to bring up guys who are 5'6" and 5'7", then you should extend that range out to the guys who are 5'9" and 5'10". Wan'Dale Robinson is 1 inch smaller than Elijah Moore, same weight. We've also seen guys like Steve Smith, Tyreek Hill. I know that Tyreek Hill is listed 5'10" on most sites, but if you go to his pro day at, I believe it was Oklahoma State, he measured in at 5'8". Wes Welker. Also, I want to say Wes Welker was under 5'8". I want to say he was like 5'7" or something like that. All of these guys, I'm not saying that Wan'Dale Robinson is a shoe-in to succeed and be the next Wes Welker, be the next Elijah Moore, Steve Smith. I'm just saying that the narrative of we have never seen this height succeed in the NFL, I think it's a tired narrative. We have seen small players. We have seen players within an inch of Wan'Dale Robinson be just fine. He's also not as frail as a Tutu Atwell, who's like 155 pounds. He's also not a Rondale Moore, where Rondale Moore had one good season in the Big Ten. Wan'Dale Robinson had 3 good seasons across the Big Ten and then also the SEC at the end of it, where he put up a crazy season. I'm compromising here. That's why I have him at wide receiver 10, even though I would be completely fine putting him in B tier. I think that he belongs in B tier behind Olave, but I am compromising here. I understand the concerns. I am completely understanding. I acknowledge the fact that he is small. He has a weird conventional fit. I'm not just going to be like some other data guys who just sort of ignore everything, blindly follow the model, and say, I don't care how he looks, he produced, I'm going to draft that player. It just comes down to the fact that Wan'Dale Robinson, there are no other wide receivers I can make the case for. A first-round Jahan Dotson, fine. Any first-round wide receiver ahead of Wan'Dale Robinson, fine. A wide receiver with Aaron Rodgers ahead of him, fine. But then past that, you're asking a lot of me. So that is all we got for today. That was a really 46 minutes. Jeez, man. That is my bad. Let me know down below in the comments. Let me know if you made it this far. First of all, if you made it this far, let me know. And second, if you made it this far, let me know if I was rambling too long. I'm going to do the same video tomorrow on running backs. If it was too long, I will cut it down tomorrow I will try to get it under 30 minutes. So without further ado, that's going to do it for today. If you want access to the entire rookie rankings, I have my top 50. So if you draft through 4 rounds of your rookie drafts, I have all of that in the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. And not just that, it is a plethora of things. You get my redraft rankings, my dynasty rankings. I'm updating my dynasty rankings over the weekend. You get my rookie rankings. You get my RS grades. So you can see all of my RS grades from 2007 through 2022. This class, you can see everything. I'm an open book in terms of the Patreon. And on top of that, it is $5 to join right now. But starting Sunday, it's going to be like $8. Anybody who gets in before that will be on that $5 rate till the end of time when you stop subscribing. So if you want to get in for a discounted price, now would be the time to do it so you can go out there and dominate your rookie draft. So with that being said, as always, I love you guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Meaner.